Welcome to this session about Microsoft Teams, where we are going to take a look at the extensibility features of Microsoft Teams. That is how you can take the conversational UI and extend it with your own features, or even use third-party features and integrate with your own systems to make the Teams client or the Teams environment into your sort of hub or application into the whole Office 365 or whatever LOB system you have out there. I'm Wictor and work for Avanade. Avanade has been one of the partners that were in the very early beta of Microsoft Teams when it had other names that should not be mentioned here. And we are still in one of the earlier ring as well of Microsoft Teams, which means that we get to try all the new features, but also give feedback on the features. And some of the stuff we're going to take a look at in here are currently in developer preview, so you cannot use that, or you should not use it in a production environment, but it will be rolled out fairly soon. I'm a long-time SharePoint MVP and been working with Office 365 for quite some time, rolling out different kind of features, everything from SharePoint Exchange to you name it. But I never seen this much excitement around any feature in Office 365 such as Microsoft Teams. And I think it's really good that Microsoft has thought about both the out-of-the-box experience, but also made it available for us consultants, ISV, third parties, system integrators, or whatnot, to extend the Microsoft Teams environment with our own applications and our own solutions. Feel free to ask questions during the session. It will be quite a lot of demos and code, but I need to have some slides in between just to explain certain kind of concepts, etc. First, let's take a look at the overall picture of Office 365, where we can extend it in many different ways. We can extend it everywhere from the Office clients, where we can create add-ins, to we can create our own applications on the right-hand side, where everything essentially are tied together using the Microsoft Graph. We can even embed our stuff into documents, into pages in SharePoint, for instance, but also now in Microsoft Teams into the conversations. We've had conversations in both Outlook, Yammer, SharePoint, etc. previously, but we could not augment our own stuff into those conversations. But in Teams, we can actually do that with the bots and connectors and other stuff you will see during the session. For me, the hub for the teamwork in Office 365 is Microsoft Teams, I would say. First of all, we have the chat and call and meetings features. I hope, first question, how many of you in here are using Teams today? That's good. Then you know all about how great experience it is to actually work with Microsoft Teams and have that chat experience. And for me, it's the persistent chat that we have compared to Skype. When we had a meeting, we lost the conversation or the links or whatever we shared when we exited that meeting, or if we missed the meeting. So that's a great way of working with it. Another thing is that we use at Avanade, we integrate with some more applications. For instance, in our development project, we integrate with Visual Studio Team systems. So I get notifications when a build fails, etc. Or the whole team get notifications. And we can start having a discussion around that build failure, for instance. We can get data from Dynamics CRM about new opportunities and whatnot. And this is what's so good about that. Microsoft made a number of out-of-the-box integrations, but I also made a great framework, so we ourselves can extend Microsoft Teams using our own extensions, and that's what the focus is on this session. And of course, at the same time, be compliant, have good enterprise-grade security on everything we do, having data stored in Microsoft Graph, using standard protocols to read information from there, using standard authorization protocols, etc. So I think this is a very good opportunity for all of us to actually make great stuff happen into the conversation, where I hope we will have most of the meetings, etc., etc. And also, if you listen to the Ignite conversation about the new roadmap for Microsoft Teams, and that it over time will replace Skype, and they just yesterday afternoon announced more about the roadmap from Skype to Microsoft Teams when it will come up to feature parity. But I also talked about something called intelligent communications, and that's where when we have a meeting in Skype today or in other similar solutions, we have a meeting and that's it. The vision for the intelligent communication with Microsoft Teams is to have them both before the meeting, during the meeting, after the meeting. So we can do stuff before the meeting, prepare that in Microsoft Teams. We can have the meeting and have it automatically transcribed. We can have intelligence listening to our conversation and see that Kalle gave me a task using voice, and the intelligence takes note of that and actually creates a planner task for me, for instance. And also after the meeting, we can do follow up on these tasks that happened. And also in this pipeline, we will be able to inject our own extensions or our own augmentations of making meetings even better. So that was a little bit background on Microsoft Teams and why we should extend it. So in Microsoft Teams, they coined the term Microsoft Team App. That is, any extension we make to Microsoft Teams is an app. And it's a pretty new construct. It's a version 1 they just released. Version 1.1 was released the other day. Most of you are running the version 0.4, actually, to be technical, which is the preview version. But it's just coming out right now in version 1. So yes, that will happen more in the future. But I think we can do quite a lot with what we have right now. But the idea is to make your application, your service, your intelligence and whatnot available right in the context where the user are working right now. Into their chat, into their meeting, into their group chats, etc. And we can enhance experience by, for instance, having a bot taking part of the conversation, injecting signals into our conversation or even start conversations. And then finally, if you're in an ISV and you have made the best solution for Microsoft Teams, there will be a store for this as well. There is a store where you can sell your stuff. We will talk about the component store a little bit later as well. So to get down to every details directly, a Microsoft Teams app is very simple in its construct. It's a single app package, means essentially a zip file that you upload either to the Office Store that someone automatically downloads if they choose to install the app, or something you sideload, just like you sideload an application on your phone, etc. So it's a simple package, and this package it's zipped and contains a manifest file. It's a JSON file which defines the features you have in your application or your Teams app. So the actual package does not contain any logic or anything, just points to the different endpoints. For instance, if I have a bot in there, it points to the Microsoft bot directory, and this is the ID of the bot. So it defines the features, and it might contain an icon, but no logic whatsoever in the actual app package. Sorry, it advanced by itself. Most often, all your stuff are hosted in a web app. I prefer using Azure Web Apps. It's so easy, and I will show you in the demo as well how easy I can deploy my app. So when I have a tab, for instance, it's an Azure Web App, and that tab is hosted in, it's essentially a web page in Azure Web Apps. My bot is hosted in Azure Web Apps. My connectors and logics are hosted in Azure Logic Apps or Azure Functions. And if we have time in the end, I can show you that you can even host all of this in Microsoft Flow. So on a high level, these are the options, or not high level, these are the options that we can extend the Microsoft Teams canvas with right now. And we will start with a demo and take a look at tabs. And a tab is essentially a blank canvas for you. You've seen the Microsoft Teams interface. You have the tabs on top. You can add Planner, and there's a wiki by default. You can add OneNote, and you can add, there's hundreds of integrations right now. But you can create your own tabs. And essentially what it is, it's an iframe with your web page in. And there's a small JavaScript library where you can store settings, etc. And there's help to make authentication easier. So you will eventually get single sign-on seamlessly to the rest of Office 365 services. As you might have noticed now, when you open Planner, for instance, you will get prompted to log in. But they are working on that, so it will be totally seamless. And you, as a developer, can take advantage of that and sign in to Office 365 automatically. I would say if you're building any kind of website or web solution today, it's very easy to take that one and make it into to a Microsoft Teams app. Essentially, you need to make sure you have the JavaScript. If you can, and I would recommend that you also adhere to their CSS guidelines, so it looks like it's really neat integrated, at least, and adapts to the light and dark themes and those kind of things. So any web app you're building today or have built, it's very easy to turn into a Microsoft Teams app just by adding that JavaScript library to it and make sure that you can store the settings, but also then make this package manifest with the JSON file and point to your web app. And then you can upload it to your company store. If it's a public app, you can upload the Office store, or you can sideload it. The second thing which most people get excited about is bots, of course. And bots is another way of having intelligence into your conversation. For instance, you can have a bot that automatically pings you or your team, or reminds you about certain things. Or it might be someone you have a conversation with. For instance, you assign a task to a bot. For instance, please, dear bot, go and build this solution for me now. And that's up to, I would say, preference, if you prefer typing in long sentences or clicking on buttons, etc. But the whole idea with bots is specifically around Microsoft Teams. It is part of the conversation. You can see the history of what you assign. For instance, if you assign a task to a bot, you can see that. It's built using the bot framework, and we'll take a look at how to build those in a minute. The cool thing with the Microsoft bot framework is if we build a bot for anything, we can build it for Facebook, we can build it for Skype for Business, but also Microsoft Teams. So enabling Microsoft Teams usage for your bot is essentially just enabling click on a button in the bot framework interface. And we'll see later the bot I have in here even integrated with the Cortana on my Windows 10, so I can ask the same questions there. Third thing is connectors and actionable messages. Connectors, hopefully some of you are familiar with. It's exactly the same connectors as we had in Outlook groups. That is, we can inject, it's a signal into the conversation. Triggers outside, for instance, insert news from Bing, for instance, or subscribe to an RSS feed, or from your CRM system and whatnot. So it pushes the information into the channel. And then that information is in rich cards. You can define it. Could have text, images, it can have buttons and even input forms right now, and those are called actionable messages. And the actionable messages that you use in Microsoft Teams are exactly the same you can use in Outlook right now. For instance, if you use Microsoft Flow and the approval flow there, then you get an email and you are asked to click a button right in Outlook. You don't have to go to an interface to approve the document and whatnot. So the same can happen in Teams. For instance, you get an approval, or a team get an approval. Do we approve of this build, for instance, to deploy to production? Then we can get that actionable message into our conversation, and someone clicks on the approve button, and that fires off some other actions. The fourth thing is compose extensions. That's the part that currently is in preview, and that allows you to do a couple of things. First of all, it allows you to interactively insert these kind of rich cards into conversation. Instead of having connector pushing it into, you can insert rich cards. For instance, I want to insert information about a client or a customer or something like that, and start a discussion around that. Or it might be a drawing, but you want some metadata around that. It's also a way for you to instruct a bot, for instance. These are or tell the end user what actions a bot can do. We will all take a look at these four during a set of demos. So, next question is, of course, how do I start building this? This session will focus on building everything with Node.js and TypeScript. If you want to, you can, of course, install Visual Studio, download the Microsoft Teams template, and start building it in C# and whatnot. For Node.js, we created a template, or rather I created it because I needed to build Teams apps, and now it's governed by Microsoft, so it's on the Microsoft official Office Dev repository. It's a Yeoman generator, so you go to a command prompt, type Yo Teams, and it asks you a number of questions. What extension types do I want to? And it will create the skeleton or scaffold out your project. So it will be very easy for you to get started. Otherwise, you need to handcraft these JSON files, and I guarantee you that you will type stuff wrong. So to install this, you just type npm install generator-teams-global, and you will be set to go. And I think that's where our first demo should start. So let's go to the command prompt. Yes, I have one here. To get started, all I need to do is create a directory. TechDays demo, and in here I type yo teams spelled correct as well. And now it will start a generator, and it will ask me, and as you can see, I'm running the preview generator, and that's one focused on the 1.0 schema. So if you want to use the latest and greatest features, you should install the preview, and that's instructions on the GitHub repository on how to do that. First of all, I need to give my solution name, take the same here, and I use the current folder. Then I need to give it a name, nice name, TechDays demo, my name. And what we've done in this generator is that we assume that you want to deploy this to Azure. You don't have to, but so you can type in your own URL here or modify the URL. But we assume that this will be your Azure website. And the reason we're doing that is because we're adding some extra files, so it's very easy for you to use the Git integration with Azure websites. So you can just push your committed your commits to Azure and directly push it into production or staging and whatnot. So it's very simple to deploy. So I take that one. Then I get the 5 different options here on what kind of extensions I want to make. First of all, I can choose a tab, or I can choose a combination of these and a bot, for instance. There's a thing called the Microsoft Teams custom bot. Let's skip that one. It's not a pretty solution. It's something that someone invented. I don't know why. It's in there, but you shouldn't use it. So that's for another session. I can choose to add a connector and also compose extension. In this case, we choose a tab and a bot. And depending on what I choose here, I will get a set of extra questions. For instance, what's the default tab name? We can accept that one. It's too long. Okay, Tech TD demo, like that. Then I can choose, have I already created a bot, for instance? I already have it hosted somewhere, or do I want to host it in my solution here? So I want to add a new one. I want to host it and create everything from scratch here. So I choose a new framework bot and give it a name. And all the bots, as I said, are registered in the Microsoft Bot Framework. So you need to go in there, register it, and get the GUID back. You can type it in here, or you can just press Enter and type it in later and modify your manifest JSON file. I can also add a static tab to my bot. That is, for instance, I want an About page. When I go to chat to directly one-to-one chat with the bot, I might have some an About page about the bot, for instance, with the instructions and whatnot. For instance, if you've seen the T-bot in Microsoft Teams, who help you with Teams, it has an release history tab on that one. We don't add a tab this time. And next what will happen, it will create all the files you need for this one. It creates a set of HTML files, TypeScript files, images, deployment files, and it starts downloading a set of Node.js packages for you to get started. So it will take a couple of minutes. So we skip over to a solution I already created, which we have here. It's a demo I built for Ignite, and it uses. The idea is to show information about sessions at Ignite. Unfortunately, TechDays did not have that good API that I could use to get the sessions out, so I'm still using the Ignite demo here. I have opened this solution in Visual Studio Code, and what will happen when we scaffold out this project, let's do it like this, is that we will get, first of all, a README file with some basic information how to set it up, how I build everything. I use Gulp to build everything. I need to package a manifest, and there's a Gulp task for that. We'll take a look at those in a minute. Oh, sorry, I wanted the preview. But also, down here, we have some information about how it's hosted, but also how we very easily deploy it to Azure using Git. So all the instructions you need to just get that continuous integration deployment going, the instructions are in the README. Depending on what kind of extensions you added, for instance, if you added a bot, you will also get a README for the bot and how to set that up with instructions for the bot framework portal, but also for the connector. Yeah, it's not really done yet. It's a work in progress, but we create you some help as well, so you can quite easily get started. And everything will be hosted in the source directory, where we have the manifest first, but also the app folder, which contains the actual code. So before we go into the code, let's take a look at the manifest and the JSON file here. And scroll to the top. And this is a JSON file. And you can see I'm using the schema 1.0, manifest version 1. And this defines all the features in my Teams app. In this case, I need a couple of stuff to start with. I need an ID, I need a version, I need to have the developer. But also, you cannot go without the privacy in terms of use URL. Specifically, if you're going to deploy this to the Office store. This is one of the things they're looking into, the terms of use. For instance, if you're building a bot, that means that you might sending company confidential information to some other server somewhere. So if you're going to deploy this to the Office store, you better have good terms of use, otherwise no one will use it. There are actually some bots in there, and I urge you to take a look at and go through all the terms of use and license agreement on the default bots. There are some bots that actually, when you start using it, you consent to that they are allowed to resell the data you send to them. So we had a guy at Avanade going through all the bots, and we turned all of them off right now, because there are very suspicious terms of use on some of these. Then you need to give it a name, description, and some icons. And then we come to the different features here. We will not go into all detail, but for instance here, we have two kind of tabs. Configurable tabs are the ones I can add as an end user. When I go into Team, I can add a new tab. And the configuration URL points essentially to a web page. And that's an HTML page we have in here. And that web page is what we, when you click on add, you get the configure dialog, and that's the HTML for that one that we do. And then we can have a content page and also delete page. We have the static page down here, which was about the Ignite bot. We have some other things. We have the actual bot definition down here. We'll take a look at that later. We also have here it is, the connector, and that's just the ID for the Office 365 connector. So it's not much in here, but if you need to change the ID of the connector, if you create a new one or want to manually add more, you need to go into this manifest.json. And what will happen is that when we're done, we have this file, we built our code, we want to build this package, then we type gulp manifest, and that will actually create the zip file for you, and it will be in the manifest, what's it called? Package folder. In here we will have a zip file, and that's the file we either upload to the Office store or sideload into our team. So if we jump over to Microsoft Teams and see how we can sideload this, we go into our TechDays team that I created into administration of that team. I need to be an admin. All the side loading must be enabled in the admin portal. Then I see the bots tab over here. First thing, by the way, that I need to do. Right now I'm in standard release mode of Microsoft Teams. To be able to get all the nice new features that are in preview, I go here to About, into Developer Preview, and that will reload Team for me, and I get to use all the new nice features. And as you can see now, it's renamed from bots to apps in here. When I click on apps here, I can either click discover apps and see what apps do we have in the store. And you can see there are plenty of them in here. Or I can go back to my team, go to admin, apps, and down in the right hand corner we have sideload an app. And in here I just choose the zip file that I created, the manifest file, and upload that one. It will validate that it's a correct manifest file, and if we're lucky we will get the app sideloaded. And we will, if we go back to the channel now, we can see that I have added the Ignite Teams app to the team, and I can click on that and get all the information. And here you have the privacy statement, services agreement, etc., and you can see what features are in this app. So that's the basic of getting started. So let's go back to a couple of slides and take a look at tabs to start with. So this is just an architecture picture first of the different files when I'm jumping back and forth here in the demo. On the left-hand side, you have the app manifest, so to say, with the manifest JSON and 2 icons. There are strict requirements on how these icons should be created. The first one, the smaller one, is essentially black and white one, which is a small icon. The other one can be colorful. And yeah, if you do an internal app, it doesn't really matter unless you, of course, you want it to look good. But if you're deploying it to the Office store, there are requirements. They will validate that you follow the guidelines for this. On the right-hand side is my Azure web app and the different files I have in there. It's essentially a website. I have then in start page, I have in terms of use, I have the privacy page. Then I have a couple of HTML pages for the tab, which is the first one, ignite tab.html, is the canvas that I see in the tab. The config page is the configure page, and I also have a remove page. For instance, if I remove a tab, I might want to have the opportunity to remove stuff from, I might have another database where I store information about that tab, so I have that option. The blue ones is just the bot endpoint, where my bot is hosted, but also have the static tab for the about page for the bot. And finally below I have the green ones are my connector. I have a configure page and 2 different endpoints. The connect endpoint, which I use to connect the connector, and then I have a dummy interface, a ping there, which I can just go to that page and it would send my information away. And finally, I created an internal API to retrieve the Microsoft Ignite sessions as well to avoid cross-domain calls, so I have it internally in my app. Yes, so tabs. It's all about making the Microsoft Teams canvas more interesting and adding more your stuff into the team or the channel you're in right now. So what you're doing essentially is putting information from your LOB system or other system right where the users are, and hopefully for me I start Microsoft Teams before I start Outlook essentially, because that's where my information are, and when I'm in a project I want to have that information in there. The good thing for the end users is they don't have to have open a Chrome or Edge or whatever and have your web application in there. It will be in the same context, and they can go back and forth between discussions and different kind of tabs, etc. And that's the whole piece of it. And make sure that you tailor your applications to fit into the Microsoft Team canvas, and that's what I mentioned about the CSS, etc. If you're changing themes between the dark and the light theme, when you build it using the Yeoman generator here, the Yo themes, you will get those features. It will automatically switch the correct CSS for you, so those features are by default. Of course, if you add your own CSS stuff to it, you need to make sure that it works like that. Yep, let's take a look at tabs then. What I have in my app here is that I can click on plus to add a new tab, and here are the default tabs, but I also now can see my Ignite tab in here. So I can click on that one, and the first one it will load is actually the configure tab, or the configure page. And in here I just ask for a string. You don't have to have anything in here. Or you can ask for them to give a name to the page or the tab and whatnot, or have essentially what you want here. So we assume we want to show all the sessions related to SharePoint in this tab. And I click Save. Now it will create the tab for me. It will load the content tab essentially with the information to only fetch SharePoint sessions from Microsoft Ignite in this case. And it just shows it randomly takes, or not randomly, it takes the first 10 sessions about SharePoint in the Ignite session catalog. And this works almost good with when I'm switching themes. Let's go to the dark theme here. See how that looks like. You can see even my tab switch, my custom CSS didn't work, so I have some more work to do there, but you can see the background, etc. at least switched. So let's go back to the light theme again. Yep. And that's how you add your tabs essentially. And then I can go in here, go back to settings if I want to change that one. And I'm back on the configure page. And also, it added information about this to the conversation, so I can click on that one. And here you can see the use of the larger icon, and the smaller icon will be in other places. And if we take a look at the code for this, in app here, first of all, my Azure website is hosted using Express, and Express is a very lightweight and easy to work with web server essentially, and that's hosted in server.ts. So we scroll down a bit and ignore that. There we have a couple of essentially standard stuff. This is all generated by the generator, but essentially if you're asking for something called ending with tab or ending with config or remove a connector, serve that corresponding file. And that's what we have for these three are for pages or tabs. And in my web folder, I actually have these tabs. We have the Ignite Configure tab, the Remove tab, and the Actual Content tab. So if you take a look at the config tab here, it's very simple. I use some Bootstrap, but I also reference the MS Teams app.css file. Then I use the Microsoft Teams classes here, so it looks like it's really nice integrated, my configure input field there. And then I just have an input field where I ask for that. And connected to this page, there's a small JavaScript file, and it's in scripts, and in this case it's called Ignite Config as well. So in here I'm loading first of all the Microsoft Teams. I initialize that component, and then I register an onSave handler, which essentially just takes the data from takes the data from my field and then creates a new tab like this. It uses set settings, points to a URL. This is where I host my tab, the page for my tab, and then I set the value in entity ID. It could be JSON string. You can do it. I just put the value in there, so it's very simple. And then finally notify that I'm successful. So it's fairly simple to create a tab, and as you can see, if you already have an existing web app, all you need to do is create a similar file as this one, and add your exact. You can do whatever you want on that actual content page later. So if we take a look at the actual content page, it's very simple as well. There we have it. This is all I have in that page. I have a div that says loading. If you could see that, it said loading before it retrieved my stuff from the Ignite web service. Then I just have a JavaScript method called doStuff. And that's a JavaScript method in this file here, which then, once again, get the Microsoft Team context. And then I use the standard fetch solution to just fetch data. And then I fetch the sessions, and I create HTML, and finally just inner HTML. So it's very simple. And that's what happens when I go to the tab, click on reload, or when it's loading, it's fetching the data and just renders it. And essentially it is just an iframe. You don't have to use the context as I do here, but if you do use that context, you can get information about the user ID, for instance. You can get what theme he or she has set, etc. if you want to make different decisions on that. I also have a page for remove, just if I need to delete data. In this case, I'm not using it at all because I'm not storing any data about this tab specifically. So this is the most simple solution you can do. Any questions on that? Straightforward. Let's go over to more fun stuff. And this is bots. I really like bots. It's an easy way and a kind of intuitive way for a lot of people to interact with someone. And that's something we see specifically in the digital workplace, something that's coming more and more. And I just read a report a couple of hours ago. I think it was Forrester Gartner said by 2021 the investment in enterprise bot will be several billions of US dollars. So it's something that's growing tremendously right now. We are seeing that we make a lot of integrations to HR systems, for instance. It's very easy to get out what are my vacation days, or I want a vacation next week, etc. and those kind of things, and make sure that you have that bot in all your interfaces. You might have it in Skype for Business, in Microsoft Teams, you might have it on SMS or email, but it's the same bot in the background. And why not, just as I said, we should put your applications in a tab in the context where the user are, but also let us put these bots into the context where the user are. And everything is built on Microsoft Bot Framework, and they also have a specific Microsoft Teams SDK, because bots in many-to-many conversation are a bit different from a one-to-one conversation. They need to understand the concept of a channel and a group of people, etc. Yes. So let's have some fun with the bot then. In this case, I created an Ignite bot. It's not that advanced, even though it might look like it when we have a chat with the bot. And what I do, you can take a look at this one. I can, of course, have a one-to-one chat with the bot, and I already have that one here. So I can say, hello, the usual stuff, and the bot will answer me in a few seconds. I can ask it about show me sessions on Microsoft Teams. As I said, this is an Ignite bot. So on Thursday, let's take let's spell it a little bit wrong as well, just for the sake of it. So I asked them a question here in natural language. Show me the sessions on Microsoft Teams on Thursday at the Ignite week, of course. And hopefully the bot will reply to me. Hopefully. Didn't like me spelling this time. Sometimes it's a bit slow. Try that one. Okay, there it is. Some spelling errors it does accept, but some I'm using the Lewis language service. We'll take a look at that one later. But right now it showed me 10 different. Oh, now it's coming a second time here. It actually understood the first time. I'm using the free tier of Azure. That's why it's a bit slow. So as you can see, it answered with almost the same thing, even though I spelled wrong here. I'm using, as I said, the Lewis language recognition service to find out what we're actually what the user actually is saying. But I'm showing here, instead of just showing text, I'm showing scrolling like a carousel of the different sessions with rich context. So it doesn't have to be that the bot answers with text. It can answer with these kind of rich media cards as well. And I can add buttons and stuff to this. And I can do the same thing in a group conversation. And if I do that, then the whole team will see what I'm asking. Show me sessions on SharePoint on Tuesday. And it asks into that thread then about that. One thing that's important to understand here, both for the end users, and they actually fixed that in the latest release. Now it says when I click here, it actually will @mention my bot directly. Previously, this when you try to reply to a thread where a bot answered, it was like it didn't @mention the bot. So if I said hello here, the bot would not get a notification. And that is something that's a bit different from other similar systems, but I think that's the right decision for Microsoft to do. I need to @mention the bot in all conversations. So it's not passively listening to the conversation, because that would be kind of scary. If you had a bot in a team and it was passively listening to whatever you're saying, specifically in an enterprise scenario. I can understand that some other consumer applications might have those kind of bots that passively listen to you, but you don't want that in an enterprise scenario. So I can say hello again. So I need to @mention it. That's important to know when you're designing your stuff. So I can even ask it for Ignite bot. What's the weather? This is a standard question that everyone tries the first or second time they see a bot. So make sure that you have an answer to that. In this case, I'm telling, no, I don't know. But I don't give an error, or you redirect to another bot that might understand the weather if you install the weather bot, for instance. But this is one of the key things when you're designing a bot, and that the dialogue schema, so to say, make sure that you take these simple things such as hello, what's the weather, what's your name, I love you. Those are the kind of things that people typically ask about. So don't throw an error. And I have the same bot here in Cortana. I registered the bot as Cortana skill, so can I ask Ignite bot about sessions on SharePoint on Tuesday. And I can even use my voice to do that. And now we get the same thing in here in Cortana on any device, etc. And I even have this one registered in Skype for Business, so I can have the same conversation there. It's the same bot, the same implementation. I originally made it for Microsoft Teams, but I can so easily publish anywhere else. So how do I build this bot then? As you saw, I went through the Yeoman generator. I then went to the bot framework portal. Let me find it. So I go to devbotframework.com/bots, log in there with my Office 365 account or my Microsoft account. Then I start creating my bot, and I have the Ignite bot here. And this bot will have an ID, which you will get on settings here, which is essentially a Microsoft App ID. And this is the ID that you copy and paste into either the generator, or if you later want to add more bots or modify the bot in your manifest.json file. And the cool thing with this is actually an Azure app, the bot. So you can give permissions to this one. I have another bot here that I call Ophelia, which actually is connected to my Office 365 account. So I can say hello to her. Let me see if it works. And she actually looks into my calendar and email and see if I have a meeting coming up, and I have a couple of flagged emails, and I have a few unread emails. She can give me those kind of information. And that's because I have an app, a Microsoft Azure AD app, which I gave permissions to Microsoft Graph to act on behalf of me. So I can actually make those kind of integrations there, which is really cool. If we go back to the, where are you? The Ignite bot here. We have a tab called Channels, and here's where I can enable the different channels. For instance, I added the Cortana, Microsoft Teams, Skype, Skype for Business, and the traditional web chat. But I can even add more. I can add Bing, probably not adding my internal corporate bot to Bing, but yeah, you can if you want to. Email is another one which is interesting. I would say the Twilio SMS one is really popular. If, for instance, if you're talking about an HR bot, I'm sick today. Why do they have to go in and talk to Cortana or something like that? Why not just have a text, I'm sick? So you have the same conversation just going on with the standard SMS interface. So here's where I can do that. I can do some analytics on the bot as well. I can configure different things on these different channels. The actual implementation of the bot is in one file. Let's minimize that one. It's in a TypeScript file down. First, two things. In my Express server, I register the endpoint for the bot here, which I get the bot settings from my application settings, which is app ID, the app password. Then I create a new instance of the class Ignite bot in this case, and I connect it to the Express endpoint /API/messages, which you match in the portal to what you have down up here. So that's the same endpoint. And this Ignite bot is a TypeScript class that I have here. That is, if you scroll up to the top, it has a couple of things. In the constructor, I have I'm using the standard Node.js SDK and the Microsoft Teams SDK to do this. So I create a new connector, which I pass in here, which is a Teams chat connector, and that's the connector that's used to you should use when you have Microsoft Teams in there, because it can handle this group conversation. Then I create the actual bot, which is essentially just a REST interface. Then I start adding some features to this one. I add in a couple of intents here. Intents is what the bot is trying to do. For instance, I use a language recognition service called Lewis, which recognizes the intent in what I'm trying to say. So Lewis is a service from Microsoft as well, from the cognitive services. So I have the Ignite Teams app here, and I train this robot or service on different intents. So I have my intents here, and I define 4 of them. countdown, which is countdown to ignite. I'm asking for how many days there is to ignite. I have a help. I have a none. You should always have a none intent. That is a fallback mechanism when it cannot find out what you're saying, but also sessions. If I click on the sessions, I can start actually, I was loading, take a couple of seconds. You can start train this one, start typing in sentences, how should we answer to this one, and then it will discover different ways of asking here. And it will even identify speakers, for instance. It will identify, it's still loading. It will actually identify these as different topics. So you can define your domain. So this is a topic, this is a speaker, this is a date, or something like that. There's something wrong with Lewis right now. Sorry about that. And also you can go in here and ask them for suggestions, because it's constantly logging what people are asking, so you can continuously fine-tune your intents here or utterances. So you can see here it is. Show me sessions on. It discovered it's a product in here, date time. Then I can have, actually I'm in the sessions intent now, and I have this reset here. It shouldn't be in this intent, so I can reassign it to none in this case. Yes, and then I train the model and publish it, which is really cool. And this is really hard to do manually, interpreting text. Unfortunately, Lewis is only built on the 7 or 9 biggest languages in the world, but it actually works quite good. Pushing your Swedish text into Bing translation services, into English, and then to Lewis, and then back to Swedish. It actually works. You don't get the same accuracy, but it still works. And you can actually first even have check what language are the user saying. It might be in Swahili or Chinese or whatever. And then based on that one, you send it to the correct translation engine into English, into Lewis, and go all the way back. In my bot, so you can see here, depending on my intent, if it was countdown, help, or sessions, I start different conversation paths. I also have a default dialogue, which is very simple, where I do, we scroll down past this, where I just do text comparison. Did you say hello? If it starts with hello, yeah, say hello to you as well. If you start with help, do this. If you start with days, I do this. So I can have this manual way of doing it as well. And if we go back to the Lewis thing, if we take a look at the intent here, sorry, I need to scroll. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong one. It's down here. So what I'm doing when I get this data from Lewis and the intents, I try to find out all the topics, the date times, and the products that's been mentioned in this sentence that was passed to the bot. And based on that one, I can create a query and just send it away to the session, the Ignite session web service API, and get data back. And then I just create a new, some code to do that, and I essentially create a new thumbnail card is what I call it here, with titles, subtitles, texts, and what happens when I click on it, etc. And it's all in this SDK, so it's very simple for you, easy for you to create these different kind of cards and set the correct properties on them. Once you've done it, you should be fairly easy to do. So that's how you work with bots. There's a couple of other things here that are interesting. If you take a look at the manifest file, let's first demo it. So when you see here, I start mentioning Ignite bot like that. I get some hints here. Instead of saying help, I can actually click here and get this information direct. Yes, I can ask for countdown to Ignite like that instead of typing. So giving some visual cues and smart cues to the end user is something you can define in your manifest. That's not part of the bot framework. And you do that in the manifest file. How are we on time? Running out on time, let's go fast. So I can, in my bot, when I define that bot, I can actually specify command lists here, which is very simple. This is a title and description to invoke those commands. So that's very good for you to have. Yeah, we could spend hours on this one discussing it. There's one thing I want to show you. Let's go back to the bot in the start, the Lewis part, where we have the recognizer. The recognizer is a class that you used to initialize Lewis with, and how it should recognize the intents and pass it away to the Lewis web service. And I created a custom recognizer called Teams Recognizer, because what will happen is that by default the whole text is sent to Lewis, and that actually in a group conversation that includes the @ mention of the bot. So you need to remove the @ mention of the bot in the beginning of the sentence, otherwise Lewis gets confused because Lewis just sees text. It sees @ignitebot show me sessions. So what I'm doing here, I have a custom Teams Recognizer. It's very simple. Just remove all mentions of people. Right now it removes all of them. It should essentially just remove the first one. But that's important to bear in mind. Otherwise, I started building my bot and training all the intents on just a one-to-one conversation. Then I started having a group conversation. Then everything was messed up because there was some other text in the beginning of all the sentence, and it doesn't really make sense for a language recognition service to see @ mentions of people. So that's just a tip. Okay, that we had some fun with bots. Let's talk about the last thing, which is connectors. Connectors are a very easy way to inject information to your conversation. It's one way, it's from some service into your conversation. You can put interactive and rich cards in there and ask people to take action. And the cool thing is that it's both supported in Microsoft Teams and in Microsoft Outlook. So it's the same way you do it. So let's talk about connectors. I also have a connector in here. And if we go here, as I meant, if you saw in the architecture slide, I actually created an endpoint that we'll use later. First, I need to add the connector. Sorry. To add a connector, I go click on ... click connectors, and I will see all the default connectors we have in here. It will load, so you can see all of them, and then your side-loaded ones will be in the bottom down here. So the Ignite connector. And I click on Configure. This is an interface that the team is working on right now. It's not that intuitive. To actually install the connector, I need to click on this one first, which will open up a new page. Then I need to click on Connect to Office 365. And then I get the configuration page for my connector. They're working on getting this as seamlessly integrated as it was adding a new tab into the Microsoft Teams interface. So it actually opens up a browser, which is not that cool. In this case, I have the simple option, do I want a blue or orange notification? I want an orange. So I click Connect. And when I'm done, I can close this browser and click Done here. So it's not that intuitive yet, but yes, they're working on that one. And we close this one down, and we'll see here that Wictor created a new connection here. And this connection could be invoked by a timer job in an Azure function or something like that. But instead of us having to wait for that, as I said, I created an endpoint that I call API connector ping, which is a simple GET request, which will ping my channel here. So it will take a second or two before it appears. Still thinking, there it came. So that's a way of getting notification. In this case, I have a card here saying, yeah, the countdown to Ignite. I had actually added the GUID in of the user here. It can add more stuff in. I can add buttons in here and do that kind of stuff. I have another example with a more interesting card here where I use Flow. So if we go over to Flow here, I created a demo connector. Edit Flow. And that's very simple. When I manually start this flow, I essentially send an HTTP request to an endpoint and then include a lot of JSON here. And this JSON I created using this website where I can load a sample. For instance, this is the one I use. So I can create these kind of rich interactive cards. So to integrate it to Microsoft Flow, all I need to do is create a new connector. This is not tied to the sideloaded application. I'm using one of the default connectors. So add connector. And then I find the one called the webhook. There it is, incoming webhook. Click add. So this is the no-code version. I click add again. Flow. create. I just gave it name flow. Then I will get an URL here, and I copy that URL and I actually post that into the beginning of my flow here. Here, replace that one with that. Update flow. Let's see if it works. Yes. See if we run this one. Run flow. See if something happens here. Yes, I haven't clicked done. That's why it failed. I need to stop that one and run the flow again. Oh, it succeeded. Sorry. And now we have this very rich card in here. As you can see, there's a lot of text, images. I can add this one, which I even add comments to this one. I can set a due date and a lot of things. I can actually make them really interactive instead of having this traditional conversation view of it. One thing I forgot to demo in the previous one was the compose extension piece, which is another way of adding more information. And if you have developer preview enabled and a bot with compose extensions, you can actually click on ... here and see your compose extensions here. So in this case, I have the Ignite Teams app. Click on that one. And in this case, I can choose from search for sessions. Let's talk search for Microsoft Teams. So this is another way of a more click-friendly way of inserting the same thing I could ask a bot for. But I can start a conversation about it like this and post here. For instance, that could typically be finding a client or customer or project or something in CRM or a product information and start a discussion around that. And compose extensions are built on top of a bot, essentially. So this is Microsoft Teams behind the scenes asking the bot the question instead, but you get a more user-friendly interface for it. So as you see now, there's plenty of places where you can start adding stuff to your conversation, where tabs are the most easiest one. I would say connectors and tabs are very easy to get started with. Bots a little bit more complex because it requires you to actually think about the dialogue and all that kind of stuff. And most likely invoke services such as Lewis, etc. Some final slides here. You want to deploy this, of course, or manage it as well. If we're talking about enterprise, this is an enterprise product. So first of all, if you are an ISV and want to deploy it, you have the Office store. It's available today. You can build your stuff, deploy it to Azure or whatever, wherever you host your application, create your manifest, upload it to Office store, go through a set of approval steps, and it will be in there. Very soon, there will come a company store as well. Because if you build your internal super secret app, you don't want to have it in Office store, right? So right now, your only option is to sideload it per team, but you want to deploy it to all of your users in your side organization. So very soon we will see, hopefully, and before the end of this year, at least a preview for a company store where you can deploy it locally. As I also mentioned, it's really important that I can assume that most of you have the default settings for Microsoft Teams today, all apps enabled and go bananas. I can highly recommend you to go in there and make sure to only enable those services you think are important for your users. So if you're not using Dropbox and that's not allowed by your organization, disable Dropbox. Otherwise, people can really easy just make, as soon as we upload something here, post it, copy to Dropbox, my personal Dropbox somewhere. Those kind of things. You most likely don't want that. You can also turn on and off side loading if you don't want your users to make their own stuff. And you do all that in the portal.office.com. Choose Microsoft Teams. We can just take a look at that. It should be in this one here, I think. Nope. Oh, sorry, this one. Did I close it? Admin Center, there it is. You go to Microsoft Teams here, then you have the apps feature where you can either enable, disable the default apps, but also if you disable that one, you can go in and actually choose. I only, for instance, disable all of them, but I want Adobe Sign, for instance. So I can go in here and take a look at them. And as I said, if you enable them, go make sure you read their privacy and terms of use. There are some weird ones. But yeah, it's great that we have the opportunity to do this. Hopefully this interface will get a little bit better as well. And also you can of course disable all apps by default if you don't want that at all. That's about it, friends. I did it in 1 hour this time. I did the same session in 20 minutes at Ignite. But you could easily spend a couple of hours on go into the different details. The idea was to show you that there are a lot of options of making Microsoft Teams even better than this, and I see huge interest in this, and especially now when Microsoft Teams is getting a good hold of companies, and we see them start using it. So thank you very much, and don't forget to vote on the nice new Lollipop station outside. They finished the project just 40 minutes before TechDays started this morning, so stress test it. Thank you.